Hello, Marion. How are you this evening?
I am good, thank you. Am I on in terms of pictures? I've got no picture.
You will have shortly. Once we start, we'll switch over
Okay,
to
no
pictures.
problem.
Thank you again for joining us as ever. Difficult and interesting times at the moment. Always entertaining. So I'm going to hand over to you. You should be able to see your picture now.
Yeah, I've got it.
Excellent. So I will leave it over to you.
Okay, good evening. Strange times, but what's great from my point of view is you have no excuse to say you haven't got time to do physio. This is a wonderful opportunity to not only get your exercises done, your stretches done, but also to come up with some amazing ideas for ways of building exercise into play, home learning, whatever. What we want to do tonight is spend the first hour, possibly hour, 10, 15 minutes on all those things you should be thinking about. So we're really back to exercise and stretch. But one of the things I have been asked to do, if it works, is to look at how we can exercise in a chair or for the sitters and the best ways of exercising. Chair, actually, particularly wheelchair, is not always the best place to exercise. But if that's what you're doing most of the day, let's give it a go. So that'll be at the end. A lot of what we do tonight will be based around the questions you ask. But there's a few things that I really want to go through that I feel are important for getting through these however many months we have to be isolated. The first one I want to think about is splints. Obviously, children particularly, not so much adults. Children tend to grow out of their splints being at home. Maybe they'll put on weight, maybe they'll lose weight. What do we do with splints that aren't fitting? Because most services will not change your splints. Now that is foot splints, possibly CAFOs. If you have a spinal jacket, your child has a spinal jacket, that is a different situation. From our point of view and from my personal feeling, jackets are important. It's not enough to say, let's sit this out. Let's just say we will wait until this is all over to get our jackets sorted. The problem we have with deteriorating spines is that 3 months can make a difference. If your jacket is not fitting or your child's jacket is not fitting, if it is making red marks, if it is uncomfortable, causing pain, then please consult your local service. I know they are sometimes difficult to get hold of in this situation, but everybody should be able to get a jacket altered. You can't do it yourself. You can make it looser, but that doesn't always help the problem. I think it is really important that the jackets still fit. We are still open for jackets. Not everybody wants to come in to do it, but if you really have a problem, you must sort it out. When it comes to CAFOs, you probably will not be getting CAFOs unless you or your child walks in them for a significant period during the day. If you're just standing in them, standing in a standing frame in them, or using them to stretch, nobody, I'm afraid, will look at CAFOs at this point in time. Foot splints, similarly, if there's a problem, we're going to have to manage as best we can. One of the things that you are told over and over is that if your splints are made by one company, another company will not alter them. That is understandable. There are insurance issues, there are regulatory issues that stop that happening, but we are not in normal times. If it's not your local service who normally do your foot splints, if they're causing problems, they're making marks, better than losing a good foot position, you try and get somebody to alter the splint. Now, what's really important, and I have somewhere got some felt, I don't know where I've put it, I've got a whole array of things. Foot splints. Now we know that many foot splints are padded over bony areas, but they can still be rubbing. It's really important to think If you have felt, if you've ever been given any sticky felt by your local service, fine. You can use little things like makeup pads folded up. What you must not do if your splints or your child's splints are rubbing is pad where they are rubbing. You will make it worse. Think about it. There is pressure over one of the bones at the sides of the ankles or the sides of the foot. If you pad over that bone, you are making it tighter and therefore causing more problem. You have to pad either by cutting a hole and making it into a little donut so that the pressure is removed, or by making a pad on either side of where the pressure is. So if the bone is here, I want a pad on one side of the bone and the other side of the bone to push it away from where that place is causing pressure. It is possible, but be careful to bend out the plastic with heat guns, but do not try it over padding, because you'll do nasty things to the padding. Don't do it where the straps are. It can be done over heels, but you've got to know what you're doing. You've also got to be aware the plastic gets extremely hot and you can melt it badly if you're not a dab hand with a heat gun. Beware. You do need to continue foot splints, otherwise we're going to have an enormous amount of serial casting and things to do after this is all over. Serial casting is again something we're not going to be doing at this time because it's not considered obviously urgent and you do not want 2 or 3 trips to the hospital to have it done. Please, therefore, wear your splints sensibly, often, lots of active stretching, lots of work, lots of good positioning. Sitting all day will make knees and hips tight. If your standing frame was at school and it's not at home, you will need to possibly spend a little bit more time sitting flat out on the floor or on the bed, stretching that way. Andy, any questions coming in so far?
Yeah, we have some questions. I'm not sure if you want to start these now. There's quite a lot of questions about different types of physio.
I'd like to direct today's session through the questions as they come in.
Okay, so first question then. Hip contractures, exercises for floor and in a chair. Can you suggest?
Okay, it's very, very difficult to do any hip flexion contracture work sitting in a chair because your hips are in that flexed position. Really, you need to be on a bed or on the floor. Now, those of you who know how we work, we do our hips in lying, and what we like to do is bring you to the edge of the bed. We have one leg hanging down, one knee going up, and the stretch is across the front of the hip that is down. So ideally, if you have a divan or a bed that has no end, or you can go across the bed, you should be towards the edge of the bed with your leg hanging off the bed, one knee up, one knee down. Now, this leg that is pushing down should be actively pushing down towards the floor, not just the foot, the whole leg from your gluteus maximus, your nice chunky bum muscle, should be trying to push down towards the floor. If you cannot get to a position where you've got your leg hanging over the edge of a bed, it could be some settees. If you cannot get to that position, at least get to a position of one leg up, one leg down, where this is still the hip being stretched. This leg doesn't have to be that far up, but as far as possible, this one up, this one down. The reason this one has to be up is to flatten the pelvis. If the pelvis is arched, then the stretch is just going to be here and not here. So you need this knee up, because what happens when you push this knee up is it pushes the pelvis back and it allows a better stretch here. So this is why we have one knee up, one knee down. So that is the best hip stretch. It should be active. We've always said that the leg that's coming down, if you've got it over the settee or over the bed, you can have the cat under there, little brother or sister. We don't mind what gets squashed, as long as you squash from the hip, not just the foot. Okay, we'll go through that again if anybody wants. Otherwise, next question, please.
Poor cat. Okay, so we've got a question now for. Okay, please help us with knee contractures. What can be done? We work daily and we still have issues.
The biggest problem is that your hamstring is one of your strongest muscle. Now, you will hear repeatedly, we don't stretch hamstrings. And the reason we don't stretch them is because just by stretching them, you are affecting both the hip and the knee for standing. But if you're sitting all day, if your legs roll out into that froggy position, your knees will be bent. Ideally, you would spend time with your knees in splints. If you're really getting a problem with knees, ideally you would have gaiters or knee splints, or even look at some serial casting. Now, the important thing that we're always saying about all these stretches is that you can work for hours and hours, but ultimately the work needs to be done by the child or the adult as well. Oh, hello, I've got a dislocated hip. Okay, so we've got a bent knee. It doesn't want to come straight. Don't forget that what is happening at the knee is also affecting the hip, or the hip is affecting the knee, but it's also affecting the foot. And people forget this. The muscles at the back of the knee attach both to the bottom and the back of the heel. So your gastrocnemius muscle, one of your calf muscles, goes from your heel above your knee. The other one, soleus, doesn't come past the knee. So what happens is if you're stretching the knee and forgetting the foot is going to end up pointing downwards. If you want a good stretch on the knee, you need to have the foot as high up, toes up, as you can get it. So when you're doing knee stretches, whoever it is that you're stretching should also be trying to pull their toes up at the same time to make sure that gastrocnemius muscle that goes across both joints is being stretched at both ends. Okay, so one of the things that we've been saying quite a lot is that movement isn't the only work that you can do. You can do static work. So even if you can't see the foot coming up when you're kicking your leg, even if you can't see the toes coming up or the foot coming up, the important thing is that you are working. The work is important. Static work is still working the muscle. It's activating. Activate, activate, activate. It's one of the things we call today's session. Activate. Activate those muscles. You know, you can squeeze your cheeks, you can make a fist. If I make a fist and squeeze really hard, once I've made that fist, there's no movement. That does not mean I am not working. It's like I always say, if you were pushing a broken down bus, you would get nowhere, but you would be working extremely hard. So don't forget, it doesn't matter if I say to someone, lift your foot, and it doesn't lift a millimeter. It doesn't matter as long as you're trying. So you need to work with the activity. It's no good doing passive stretching. All the time, you've got to switch these muscles on. Now, if I want to stretch that knee at the back, because that's where the problem is, and I work this muscle, I will still get more stretch because the muscles at the back will relax. So that's how we're going with knees. Unfortunately, it does sound, if you're really working hard and getting nowhere, you need to look at splinting. You may also look at CCDs, contracture control devices, which are splints that you can stretch and stretch and stretch. And that's something, again, you're not going to get them now. Please don't think about getting something like that on the internet. There are sports braces that you can extend, but it's something that really should be supervised by a physio. Next question, please.
Okie doke. Sharif asked a very similar question. So Sharif, I'm hoping that's also answered your question. If not, if you need any further advice, please do send it across. Right. We have a question. My 5-year-old type 3 is quite flexible, e.g. standing. He can reach the floor without bending the knees. So we still need to work on some stretching.
No, you don't. If you are hypermobile, the last thing you should be doing is stretching, because actually it can be counterproductive. Long muscles, hypermobile children have two problems. Firstly, controlling their joints because their joints move too much. And secondly, fatigue in the muscle. Now, if you have hypermobility without SMA, you will have fatigue. Add that to SMA and you've got double fatigue. We do not want bendy joints stretched. One of the problems that I'm always encountering is people talk about hypermobility, bendy, stretchy, without actually explaining what hypermobility is. It's not bendiness. That is the effect of being hypermobile. Hypermobile is a collagen problem. Now, people talk about us being a high percentage of water. And of what's left of us that is not water, most of it is collagen. Now, ladies will know that when you go out and buy face creams, they always try and persuade you to get the collagen ones, that we're going to replace collagen in your skin. It's rubbish. If you are hypermobile, you will have better skin anyway. Older people, you will see little old ladies with beautiful skin were probably hypermobile. Collagen is in everything. You can imagine that everything has to stretch except bones. Bones have minimal stretchy collagen. Skin has lots and lots of elastic collagen. Between skin and bone are various levels of stretchiness. Obviously, muscles are stretchy. They have to bend around corners, joints. So muscles have to be stretchy. Where your muscles attach to the bone, your tendons, they are less stretchy to hold the muscle into the bone. Where your joints are, you have ligaments. We all have heard of ligaments, particularly if we're football supporters, because we know that footballers are always damaging their ligaments. There are many problems with ligaments, one of them being minimal blood supply. Because it's fibrous, it doesn't need a big blood supply, so if you damage it, it takes a long time to heal. But in hypermobility, one of the biggest problems is that fibrous collagen, tough, unbending collagen, unstretchy collagen there is not as much fibrous tissue, there is more elastic tissue in those structures. So your ligaments, which should hold your joints firmly, are too stretchy. This is the children that can get their thumbs down onto their forearms, the children who some of them can touch their elbows at the back, can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And it's not helpful. It helps in as much as it reduces the amount you will get contractures, but in the mobility point of view, it can get in the way, particularly in SMA, because hypermobility is fatiguing. We don't want stretchers. These are the kids that make the best swimmers because they move beautifully in the water. But they are also at great risk on trampolines, in gymnastics, in rugby. They will injure very easily, particularly around those bendy joints, wrists, ankles. We don't need to stretch hypermobile children. Unfortunately, one of the problems of hypermobility is to stabilize your joints, you need to be stronger than normal. That doesn't help when you have an underlying problem that includes muscle weakness. Now, with ankles in bendy type 3s, you will need some form of help in terms of a SMAFO, a plastic ankle splint, and it is only ankle. We're not talking about the long foot splints like this one. This one is an AFO, an ankle foot orthosis. This is miles too big. A SMAFO only comes to here and still allows the up-down movement of the foot while controlling the heel. Or what many of the kids now wear is something called tri-lock splints. We use one called Push Acqui. Let me write down how you spell it. I'm not sure if this comes out back to front, but we're about to find out. Push Acqui. Does that look back to front? Anyway, Push Acqui.
No, that looks perfect.
You can get those on Amazon. They are sized. There are other types of ankle splints. If the children tend to have very overmobile ankles, sometimes the children prefer them to plastic splints. Bigger children, teenagers, sort of 9+, 10+, don't always get on with the softer splints if they're quite tall. But a little one who's having trouble stabilizing their ankles, there are little softer splints. If they're very small, they don't go down small enough, and you have to then look at a plastic splint, but you're not going to get anything now. But please don't stretch them. They don't need it, unless they can have tight hips as well. That needs to be checked. And you can check it the same way that we stretch them. One leg over the bed, bring the knee up. If the knee of the foot that's trying to go down over the edge of the bed keeps wanting to spring up, there may be some tightness in the hips, but generally in hypermobility, the only joint that can ever be tight will initially, when the children are little, is the hips. So you need to check those hips out. It's the only place you may still want to try stretching. Next question.
Okie doke. They're coming in thick and fast. So we have question, how do we improve, is it kyphosis or kyphosis?
Kyphosis. There are ways of treating kyphosis. It's actually, I was abroad teaching recently. We had a little boy, only 2, with a really quite severe kyphosis. That's when you've got that sort of very curved posture forwards, this sort of thing with the head down. You can improve kyphosis. It takes a lot of work. It takes good positioning. Kyphosis is better in standing with littlies. I know when we're talking type 2s, it's not always possible. Type 1s, even more difficult. But kyphosis happens for a very understandable reason. Okay, let's go back to these hamstrings. If you are sitting and your hamstring is pulling you backwards, because your hamstring, when you are sitting, particularly if you are sitting on the floor or on a bed. Now, this is really important for littlies. When you are sitting on the floor or on the bed, you have a hamstring here that attaches to your bum. When it is working, the tendency is it to pull you backwards. And to counter that effect, you will lean forwards and get that kyphotic posture. The first thing you must do in a kyphotic child or infant is get them off the floor. They need to be sitting in a little seat, because in a little seat, they will come up straighter. Now, then you will say, oh yes, but their knees and hips are bent. No, their hips would be bent on the floor. With their knees, you can have them on a little seat and not have their knees completely bent. So what you would do is have them on a little stool, not something very high, so that they can still have their knees as straight as possible, but get them supported here. Make sure this is where you want the support, around the pelvis, to stop them bringing that pelvis backwards and ending up counterbalancing with the top of their trunk. This is why you get kyphosis. Get off the floor, get off the bed. Look at your kids on their iPads and everything else, phones, iPads, look at their posture. If you have a child who is constantly on the phone, looking down, here's the phone, looking down, bring them up. They need to be looking up at their phone. This is the worst thing we can have kids doing. Constantly down at iPads. Bring them up. They should be at this height, face height. When you go to work, you have an ergonomic assessment, if any of you parents do or adults do. What they are telling you is you should be looking up towards the screen, not down. Back problems are caused by looking down at your screen. You have a work assessment of how your computer should be set up. You should be looking slightly up at the screen. The kids are down here the whole time. Get that iPad, get that laptop, get that phone up. Sit back on the settee, high back settee, in a wheelchair. Get the knees up, get a lap tray or an iPad tray. There are all sorts of things out there to stop this kyphotic posture. But for littlies, the first thing is to get them off the floor. It doesn't have to be miles off the floor. It literally can be wedge. But they've got to have that pelvis supported. And as I say, standing makes a big difference because it takes the stretch off the hamstrings and allows you to stand better. Now, the kids in their gaiters, get them in their gaiters, get them in their CAFOs, even possibly in their standing frames. The more we can stand, the better that kyphosis can be. And if you have to push on it, you can actually get them to bring those shoulders back and work at getting those shoulders back. Games, activities, stretches, shoulder blades together, over the peanut, get those arms on their tummies, get those arms out. Adults, kyphosis is not going to deteriorate, but you will get big problems if you're constantly looking down at electronic equipment. Adults, the same, not down there. Get up, because you're going to cause yourself neck problems, stretch problems, all sorts of things. We'll get onto a bit of Pilates style exercise for this when we do the more practical session at the end. Awesome. Yes, please.
Next one. Right. Hi, Marion. Luke had a steroid injection 5 months ago for his partially dislocated hip. It seems to have faded now and he's in pain again, mainly at night. Any advice, please?
Unfortunately, steroid injections do tend to be temporary. One of the big problems with hips is they can get quite stiff. It's not easy. I appreciate if somebody is spending a lot of time in their wheelchair, but mobilizing can help. The other thing that you could try gently, we don't want anybody being more in pain, but one of the reasons that hips sometimes get uncomfortable is the rubbing of bone on bone or bad positioning of the hip joint. And what you can actually do is try what we call traction. Now, traction, you would have heard of in relation to fractures, and that's when you pull the bone to keep it in a good position. And traction is a stretch actually on the joint. And what you are doing, if I can show you just maybe on a finger, is literally trying to separate one part of the joint from the other. So you are gently pulling on the joint. It's very effective on painful necks when it's done properly in the right alignment. So what you will find is if you can traction that hip, it can be quite a comfortable thing to do. And when you have tractioned it, then to mobilize it. Now, when you are trying to traction a hip, one of the best positions is to have the person in lying. We seem to have got a bit stuck. I might be back to front, actually. Oh, yeah, hang on. We've got them dislocated. Okay, so they're lying on their back. What you can do is have them with their knee bent up. And what you're trying to do is pull the hip, pull the thigh upwards. So you sometimes, the easiest position to do that is on the bed with them or on the floor, be across the leg and be pulling that hip as though you're literally trying to pull it out of the joint, not hard, gentle traction on the joint. Pull, relax, not hard, pull, relax. And then once you've pulled, as long as it's not painful, it doesn't work for everybody, as long as it's not painful, when you have that pull, wiggle it around in tiny little circles. If that works, you can go bigger. But slowly, one bit at a time, try traction on the joint and see if that helps. It's not going to take all the pain away, but it may relieve pain temporarily. Unfortunately, the only thing that's probably going to work is another injection. Hopefully, after a couple of injections, it may be that things are starting to get better. If the traction works, try doing it a couple of times a day. If it causes pain, don't do it. It doesn't work for everyone, but some people find it very relieving. Okay.
Excellent. Next question. My daughter's knees, particularly the left one, has started clicking quite loudly, and it is at times a bit painful. This is usually at the end of the day once she is being hoisted into the bed and laid flat. Why is this, and can something be done to stop it?
Clicking is one of those things that nobody really knows why it happens, and it really depends on what movement is causing the joint. Now, if it's painful, the possibility is that we're talking kneecap here, not knee joint. So without actually assessing the knee, it would be hard to say. Kneecap problems are problems, and it really depends on what movement is occurring. Clicks in joints don't usually cause pain. They are what we call benign. Most children aren't bothered by them, but a click that is painful is more difficult because it's hard. If whoever gave that question, Andy, can give me a bit more information about what actual movement causes it. Is it straightening the joint that causes it? What you may find, if it's the end of the day, it may be some activity that they're doing. It may be that it's something that needs to be reduced or changed, or it may be that it happens because the child is not mobile enough. I really need a little bit of more information on that one, please.
Okay, I mean, it says particularly when hoisted into bed and laid flat. So I assume it's stretching.
It's difficult again without knowing this child. So, did they mention an age?
No, but I believe she's early 20s. And
now early 20s is a different matter. This is, we're not talking little. Now, one of the problems we have with knees with older people is osteoporosis, osteopenia. That's when the bone is a bit thin.
And she's also, just as an added thing, that she's a type 3 as well.
Non-ambulant type 3? Oh, she must be if she's being hoisted. Okay, so what you will get is you can get thinning of the bones. And this is often a problem when joints are suddenly moved. You're sitting in a wheelchair, you're immobile all day, everything seems fine. And then when you have to be moved, that's when the pain occurs. Usually often when the joints have got a little bit stiff. The way of trying to get around that is very gentle movement several times throughout the day. It's not enough to be sitting still for long periods and then suddenly you're being changed position, and this is often when the problem happens. And it is that stretch, it is that movement. You can get, with thinning of the bones, what they call microfractures. Don't start panicking, you're not going to break bones, but there are tiny little holes in the bones when you are osteoporotic, and they can be a little bit painful when they're stretched. This is not something that you're going to suddenly treat like you treat a fracture. Microfractures are not the same thing. They're just when you have very, very thin bones with little holes, they can be painful when they're moved, particularly jerky or sudden movements. And what you need is to try and keep them a little bit more mobile, more frequently during the day to stop that happening. Okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. Best exercises for scoliosis?
That again depends on age and stage and whether this is a big child or not. You will see on the internet that there are exercises for scoliosis. They are not aimed at neuromuscular children. This is very much aimed at children with normal muscles who have what is known as idiopathic scoliosis. These are exercises to try and correct the spine using working muscles. Our children do not have working muscles, which is why they get curvature. You can stretch the spine. You can use what muscles are working to try and help. The best way of doing exercise for the spine, you can do it in sitting, and we'll talk about this to come, but some of the best exercises are the ones with therapy balls and peanuts for little children. They will not stop scoliosis. No exercise will stop scoliosis in SMA, but the important thing is that they keep the spine mobile. What you are looking for is to keep the mobility of the spine. The more the spine is mobile, the better any correction you will get with spinal surgery you will get. So that if you have a nice mobile spine that can be beautifully stretched, you will get a good result with spinal fixation. If you have a very tight, fixed, rigid spine, then spinal surgery will only stop it getting worse and not correct it. But
Marion,
there are
just to interrupt, the person has sent us some information. So the person is age 4, has had 12 doses of Spinraza, is a strong type 1. She has a small frame.
Okay, so what I would be doing with that child is lots and lots of work with a peanut or a therapy ball, lots of stretching arms, lots of using those shoulder blades symmetrically to try and stretch the spine, lots of arm work, lots of, if you've got a hot tub, lots of swimming style stuff, lots of symmetrical stuff, lots of stretching up, lots of reaching. If you can't do it in sitting because your arms are weak, do it in lying, reaching for the ceiling, reaching over your head, reaching to the sides. Again, we will look at the sort of things we should be doing. We're trying to get the shoulder blades from getting stuck on the spine, but we also want lots and lots of things on twist to both sides, on bend to both sides, backwards. We don't always need forwards. Forwards is the easy one. Back, twist, bend. Plenty we can be doing. Lots of fun stuff, ball dancing, all sorts of stuff. No end of stuff you can do to get that trunk moving.
Okay, now next question, which I think I know the answer to, is how often should you be stretching?
Ooh, how long's a piece of string? How often should you be stretching? Once, twice, 3 times a day? It's really difficult question. There's no proof how much stretching works. I have an honest belief that stretches need to be active. So if you're doing passive stretches to someone, you're the one that's gaining the benefit, not them. A lot of stretching is not about stretching, it's about positioning. Standing is one of the best stretches most people will get. Wearing splints to keep good position, very good way of getting joint control. Stretches by themselves will not work if they're short, don't last very long, not active. If you stretch even for 20 minutes, there's still 23 hours and 40 minutes that joint is not being stretched. Stretching and joint position has to be part again of a thought about what am I doing during the day? What am I positioning? When can I be in a better position? When can I change position? It's so difficult if you are sitting all day in a wheelchair to think about how you do stretches and positioning. But if you can change position, if you can lie flat, if you can be reclined in your wheelchair, if you can be on the floor in a different position, if you can be standing in a standing frame or some sort of standing sling, the more you can change position, the more stretch you will get. We cannot stretch all day. One of the things you have to think about is that movement of your muscles works your joints. If your muscles are not working through the range, you can't get the joint moving through the range. You have to change position. You have to think, should I be lying on my back? Should I be doing some work on my side? Should I be in a different position? Go for it. Try moving about. We're not at school. We're not at work. Change position. Let's see if we can really get some nice joint ranges while we're all isolated. It's giving us a lot of opportunity to get these joints some movement.
Okay, another question. What is your personal opinion on vibration platforms like Galileo?
I've sat on one, I've stood on one, I've exercised on one, I've still got a big butt, so it didn't help by sitting on it. What are we trying to achieve with these exercise vibration things? The theory when it all started was that it adds to the value of exercise. It is hard. It makes stability more difficult. I think if you are a type 3 and you are working in standing on a vibrating platform, then yes, you will get some resistance, you will get some bit of extra work. I am not convinced for a non-ambulant person that they're going to do anything. Now, one of the things that came out, I think, from Australia was a lot of endocrinology work on bone health. What they said was that it is not weight bearing that improves bone strength and health, it is vibration. Every time you take a step, the heel hits the floor and it sets up a vibration through the lower leg, through the upper leg, through the trunk, all the way up. So although it's minute, we are getting that little vibration every time our heels hit the floor on a step. So that it is the steps, it is that vibration that builds our bone strength and our bone health, not static standing. This was the work that came out. So the thought was standing frames, if they had some vibration plate in them, would be better than static standing. And that may be true. I haven't seen a study on standing frames, but there is evidence that vibration is better than static standing. So in that respect, a vibration plate may work, but there are very, very few frames with them in. Not everybody likes them. If you're in orthotics, it may well take away the value of the vibration, because actually it does need to be directly through the foot or through the shoe, not through an orthosis. That's the first thing. The other thing is there is a limit to when you're going to use them. You sat on your touche for a long part of the day. I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting one under your bum for long periods. I am not sure that they will make a big difference. There is another theory that they help venous return. In other words, swollen feet, feet with poor circulation, they may well help for that. So these are all things you can try. What you have to accept with any suggestion, any piece of equipment, it works for some, it doesn't work for everyone. Some people will find that a vibrating thing may help with their circulation, may help with their swelling, other people do not. But don't go out and buy expensive pieces of equipment without any idea of what you're trying to achieve and whether it will work, because it's too tempting to give everything a go and it won't work. I think with the problems we're having at the moment of getting even borrowing equipment, trying equipment, because nobody wants to borrow from someone else or buy stuff that they can't return, it all gets a little bit fraught. I think at the moment, if you don't have anything that vibrates, hang on and let's see when all this is over whether we can borrow or try equipment. But my honest feeling is I have got no real sense of big positives from these vibration things. Little positives possibly, but certainly not enough to justify going out and spending big money on them.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you recommend electromuscle stimulation for quadricep muscle because it's too weak to do active contraction?
Yes and no. I think, again, to use electrical stimulation can be positive. There are people that will say it will help. The long-term question is, if it is too weak to activate, what are we trying to achieve with electrical stimulation? Is it going to be enough to move you on to the next physical function level? Are you looking at standing? Probably not going to gain the power to do that. Is it an adjunct to something that you are doing? We have successfully used tape to activate quadriceps muscle. In the same way, there are people it didn't work for. Taping, if you have somebody who can tape, then taping is a very, very good way of trying to get a muscle working. And it's quite difficult because I think there are a lot of people out there who have tape at home who aren't very sure. It may be if I can, I can't invite somebody in. I do have a doll that we could possibly use, that we could do a little bit of taping and look at taping in a future session. I'm quite happy. I'm not sure if my son will roll his trouser leg up and let him use a bit of his leg, but we could ask. But tape can be effective in switching on quadriceps muscles as well. I think we need to think when we're using electrical stimulation, how much we're using it for, how much the person is working with it, how much they can feel that they can do together. The most important thing about electrical stimulation is that you are working with it. It is not passive. So as you feel the muscle being stimulated, you should be trying to work with it. Switch off the machine and then reproduce that movement. So if it gives you a twitch, do that 10 times, switch it off, try and twitch yourself. Don't keep relying on the machine, because again, you will get no result from it. If you already have electrical stimulation, you can use it, but think, yes, I am trying to activate my quads, but to what end? If I am sitting in my wheelchair all day, is it going to stop me getting a worse contracture? If the contracture is already there, no, it won't. It will help if you're doing stretches to then do the two together. So you're doing electrical stimulation with the stretch to try and work that stretch. But by itself, where is your goal? And this is what you need to think. Don't just stick things on with no goal in mind. You need a goal with something like electrical stimulation. Okay,
thank you. How can we make a soft knee splint for the night time?
Interesting question. At this, and we're going to have to be a little bit inventive. I'm not suggesting bake one. That won't necessarily help. Depends on the size of the child. If you have a couple of pieces of wood, and I seriously mean this, if dad is competent with a saw and a sander and you can get a couple of pieces of wood and some canvas, you could probably make one. In the same way that we have gaiters. If you think about what gaiters are, they're just canvas and metal strips. I haven't brought my gaiters with me. I should have done. But gaiters are literally canvas with 3 metal strips. You could possibly make up some gaiters by doing the same sort of thing. Let me draw what you should be making. So dab hand with a sewing machine, you may not have 3 little metal strips, but you may be able to make it out of wood. So you've got, I'm just going to draw it. Get your sewing machines out, mums, ladies, dads. Don't know, we might have a couple of tailors among us. Okay, so you could look at making a gaiter. So what you have is canvas. This is your gaiter. So you've got a canvas thing here, piece of canvas with 3 pockets with either some very thin wood or little metal strips and some Velcro straps. You could literally make them up, make up some gaiters. If you already have quite a marked contracture, what you could possibly do is look at making something that is pretty much the same. So you've got a jointed piece of wood or piece of metal, so that you've got something that is the shape of the knee, all wrapped around. So you've got 2 of those, one on each side of the leg, and you wrap it together with bandage or again with canvas. So we might have to be a little bit inventive until we can get some splints made. Now, one of the things that we do a lot of when we're teaching is teach what we call soft cast splints. Some of you may have had them from us or from local. They are incredibly easy to make. We are happy to send any instructions or advice to physios. We possibly have a video of the whole process. I know we were talking about making one. We could send your physio a video, because it takes 20 minutes. It seriously takes 20 minutes to make a soft cast splint. It is a very, very easy thing to do. You can do it in the home. You don't have to go into hospital to have a soft cast splint. You need 3 pieces of material and you need a jug of water. So you need a base layer. We use something called Jersey Bouclette because it's cotton, but bog standard stockinette is fine. You need cast padding, the sort of things you put under a plaster cast, and then you need the soft cast. You should use something that we use, collar and cuff, to stop it shrinking and to cut it off, but that's all you need. It's not complicated. It's really quite an easy process to make soft cast knees and elbows, very comfortable, very easy.
Excellent. So we've already talked about hip management and dislocation, haven't we, earlier on in the session?
Well, dislocation's another issue. There's not much we can do with a dislocated hip, but keep it mobile. Don't think because it's dislocated we can't exercise it or stretch it or mobilize it. You must still keep moving and keep stretching a dislocated hip. Don't make it painful, but don't stop doing it.
Okay. Right, here's another question. When standing in a standing frame, should your shoulder blade be touching the backrest if you've had magic rods, or should you have a slight gap because of tightness?
Okay, now I think what we are talking about, but you haven't mentioned in the question, people, is what sort of standing frame. So I'm assuming you're talking about what we call a supine stander, which is like a therapy plinth that you lie on and then comes up to standing. Where your shoulder blades should be is where your shoulder blades can be got. To be honest, if you have magic rods and your shoulder blades don't touch the back, that is the shape of your spine. You can do exercise with your shoulder blades, but obviously if you have a rod in your spine, you cannot move your spine very much. If it is uncomfortable because your shoulder blades are not touching the back, then you need to pad it out. But certainly if your shoulder blades are off, then you probably have a kyphotic posture, which is that curved posture, even with the magic rods. You may not expect to have your shoulder blades on the back of the standing frame. What's important is the position of your head, that is well supported and comfortable and is not poking forwards. You may find if your head is not in a good position because your shoulder blades are forward, that one of those little neck pillows that you use for the car or something may help to make it more comfortable. But if your shoulder blades are not against the back, that's not necessarily the problem with the standing frame or positioning. That may be the shape of your spine.
Okay, and yes, it is a supine stander. Right, next question. They are coming in thick and fast. How to treat contractions and tightness in fingers, elbow and shoulder?
Okay, contractions of the shoulder are uncommon. The shoulder is a very mobile joint, but in older people, certainly in 18 plus, you can get tightness of the shoulders just from lack of use, because people forget about shoulders. Apart from when you're dressing, you're not moving your shoulders very much, you're moving very much from the elbows. So what tends to happen is they're neglected. It's not so much that they have got contracted by themselves, they've just got neglected. The best way of doing shoulders is probably most comfortably in lying. And the reason I say that is because to really stretch the shoulder properly, it's not just a shoulder. Surprisingly enough, what people don't realize is the shoulder, as mobile as it is one of the most complex joints in the body, because the shoulder joint is only a small part of it. There's 2 other things going on. The first one is the connection from your clavicle, your collarbone, all the way to your shoulder. And your clavicle, as you move, obviously, it's going to have an effect. And then there's your shoulder blade. And your shoulder blade is, again, quite complex and part of the whole shoulder joint. The shoulder blade, and I haven't got a picture for you, you'll have to look it up, people, has 3 actual parts. The first one is the shoulder joint part, where it actually articulates with the head of the upper arm. So at the top of your upper arm, you have a ball and socket, a bit like in the hip, but the socket in the shoulder is almost flat. So what you have, because I've got an orange here for a different reason, so the shoulder joint is not like the hip joint, where the hip is a ball inside this nice tough cage, except it isn't in SMA. It's much flatter and allows for that nice wide movement to go around. So it's quite a lax joint, but that flat section is part of your shoulder blade. Now your shoulder blade then has the wide bone that stretches down your back. It also has this rib across the back that is the bit that sticks out here. And that is really just part of where the muscles are above and below. There's a lot going on at the shoulder joint. And one of the big problems that we have with the shoulder is when you get a stiff shoulder, the arm and the scapula, the shoulder blade, should move independently of each other, but they don't. So as you lift your shoulder up, your shoulder blade is stuck and comes up, and you get to about there, and then everything is side bend because your shoulder won't go all the way up, because you lose the independence between your upper arm and your shoulder blade. So one of the things that you should be looking at with shoulders, I'm going to have to move back a bit for this, is not just up in the air. It's these movements backwards and forwards. And that is a big movement. I'm very clicky, as most adults will be doing this. So that what you're doing is this backwards and forwards movement. And what people lose when they're lying on the bed, if you have your arm at 90 degrees, to take your arm back, it should be able to come flat on the bed. And a lot of people can't get to that. And that is a lot of shoulder stiffness. So when you're doing shoulders, don't just do this waving around all over. This is why on the bed is better. Lying down with your head supported, your spine supported. And what you're trying to do is this in and out rotation movement backwards and forwards. And that will help to loosen up that shoulder. It's not just a wiggle here and there and over the back, because if you come over the back, your shoulder blade will just stick out where it is. This way you will get more mobility of independence between arm and shoulder blade. So that's one. But you can also do that in the chair, because if you bring your arm to 90 degrees here, that is also that movement. And that again will try and bring that arm and shoulder blade separated, because that is independent arm movement, independent of the shoulder blade, and can get things moving. So that's a start with shoulders. Elbows are also complex, because your elbow doesn't just bend and straighten your arm, it turns your hand over. So at your elbow joint, you both bend and straighten and turn palm up and down. That is called pro and supination. Supination when you're palm up. One of the problems with elbows, if you have a tight elbow, but you can still get your hand fully palm up. So you're stiff there, but you can still get palm up. Then you can stretch, because that is a biceps tightness, and you can stretch it actively. Lots of work. You will get some improvement in elbows. If your hand does not turn from palm down to palm up, then you will not be able to stretch at the elbow. So we need to think about this from little. And while we tell people over and over again how important that palm up is from the point of view of the elbow, people do not work at this. We're always palm down. Most of the things we do are palm down. You think about it, you're either mid position with your phone, palm down on a keyboard. Most of the things we do not have us palm up. Many activities that we used to do as children, even simple things like turning the pages of a book, were turning our hands over. Well, this is how we turn the pages of a book now. People don't read books, they just slide across iPads and laptops and things. We're losing that ability, turning cards over. We need to use this movement. Use it or lose it is very, very true of supination palm up. Once you have lost that movement, you will not get it back. When you have lost that, you have more problem trying to stretch your elbow out because of the complexity of that movement. The reason it is so complex is there are two bones in the forearm. Unfortunately, Ike can't show you, he only has one, but that movement of turning the hand over is one bone rolling over the other. Once that's tight, you will not get it back. So we can only maintain what we have, but you will not improve that hand over. It is too complex. So parents of small children, get working on it. When it's gone, it is gone. But if you can still get your hands palm up, even if the children or adults can't do it themselves, but they can be brought into palm up, then you can palm up elbow stretch. If you just stretch without turning that palm, you won't get a good stretch at the elbow. Sorry, it sounds very negative, but I'm sorry. Gone is gone with supination.
Okie doke. Right, we've got a couple more questions and some things I just want to point out to people that have asked other questions. So we've got another question about scoliosis and positions and exercises. So we talked about that earlier on in the video. So please go back and have a look at that.
We will talk about stretches that we can do from sitting when we get to the sitting bit.
No worries.
Oh my goodness, past 8. Oh my goodness, where's the time gone?
We've also had another question about kyphosis, which again we discussed earlier. And
gosh, that's gone quickly tonight.
It has. There's loads of people asking for emails for your splint instructions, so we'll sort that out after the session.
Hang on. Let me just do this. Okay, email. That's coming. Next question.
And right, we have. Sorry, we have.
Email address. Is that visible?
Just about, but don't worry, we'll collect everybody's emails and forward on the information to you. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
Right, so I've got contracture. I don't actually know how to pronounce this word. It looks like it's LLIOPSOAS.
LLOPISAS.
No, SOAS.
Iliosoas. It's iliosoas.
Okay, iliosoas contracture. Pulling the pelvis in another tilting case, excessive hyperlordosis on standing.
Yes, iliosoas is a hip flexion contracture. Basically, iliosoas is your biggest hip flexor. It is one of your strongest hip flexors. The reason it's called iliosoas is where it comes from. One of the pelvic bones is called the ilium or iliac crest, and psoas is the actual muscle which attaches, and it basically comes from the pelvis down the front of your leg and becomes part of the quadriceps. But it is undoubtedly part. It's a little bit back to front, the comment, because the lordosis is part of that contracture. Basically, what happens is your hips are tight, so you're in that position. when you are in standing, you are then tilted. So you start off nice and straight in that position. You get hip flexion contractures, which pull your legs forwards. When you want to stand, that's where you are with your trunk going forwards. So to get upright, you then bend your trunk backwards to get upright. That's the hypolordosis, this curve here. And it's completely caused by tightness there. Yes, I agree. But to manage that, it's back to stretching your hip flexors. Active stretch here, here. If you are relatively old, the contractures have been there for a long time, you're not going to make them better. The best you can do is try and stop them getting worse. Never give up on contractures. They can always get worse. So keep going, even if it's just to maintain what you've got. This hypolordosis is from here. You may just have to put up with it. It's not comfortable, I agree, but it's very, very hard to get rid of that in the presence of hip flexion contractures. Iliopsoas is just another muscle. It's part of hip flexion contractures. Okay, how are we going? Have we got 5 more minutes of questions, and then we'll try and look at these sitting exercises?
No worries, I've got 2 more questions. So we've got, hello, my son is type 1, 4.5 years old, 16 doses of Spinraza. Now he can stand up by himself while he is on his knees. Is there a good exercise to improve his strength in his knees so in the future he can stand up on his feet?
Yes, there are lots of lovely exercises using a peanut. What we get them to do, or a therapy ball, but a peanut's probably better at 4. We get them kneeling, or he can use a little therapy bench. Obviously not at the moment. It's not something you're going to get hold of. If you've got a very low coffee table that you can pad, or a little table you can pad, kneel at it and then try and get to standing. Now, one of the problems that we have, the children can kneel, and you will get a physio coming along and saying, okay, let's get to standing by putting that leg forward and push on that leg. That is how normal children tend to get up. It's not how SMA children tend to get up, so that you've gone from kneeling, you bring that foot up to that position and you push on that knee to get into standing. But what we're seeing is different things. Now, imagine that's the peanut. So they're against the peanut. So what you're doing is you've got a peanut or a table. You could try and come up and get them to push there, or they're against the peanut in kneeling and they push on both legs and their bottom, because it's not just about their knees. A lot of this is about getting up, is about your bottom as well. If they're kneeling and they can stay up in kneeling, then it is knees, but there's bottom as well. So to come up using both their bum and their knees. But you could try, it doesn't always work. It depends on the strength of the child to come up through what we call half kneeling, or they can work at pushing up to standing through rolling over a therapy ball or over a peanut. Peanut is probably better for a 4.5-year-old. Lots and lots of lovely exercises you can do. In fact, I've just done a peanut exercise program. So I do have peanut exercise programs if people want a peanut exercise program for small children.
Great stuff. And last but not least, will you do a Joe Style Wicks morning exercise physio routine for SMA community?
Oh my goodness, I haven't seen the Joe Wicks yet. I did think I was going to get onto it. The issue is, particularly what we were just saying about doing the chair exercises, the Joe Wicks is a lot of standing and jumping around. It's basically a PE lesson. We could think about doing a sitting one. To be honest, there probably are things out there. Will I do one? Happily, if we can get it set up. I think it's really important, though, that we consider that a lot of really, really lovely, fun activity can be done in lying, in rolling, in sitting on the floor, sitting in a chair. There's so much you can do. One of the things I did last year, some of you may be aware that in Italy, it's going to probably be cancelled this year. Every summer they have a big SMA camp for SMA kids and families. It's amazing. I've been there twice. I should have been there this year. I don't think it's going to happen. Amazing camp. And we did a Pilates session for the teenagers. It was amazing. All but one of them were type 3 who was standing, but we had a great fun session with balloons, doing Pilates. You can do all these things in sitting. Lying is a great place to exercise. Rolling is fantastic. You don't just need to stand to exercise. What we are going to do is I'm going to try and push back. I am just pushing my table across my room. I am going to go backwards, see if I can get this to work so that I am sitting. Okay, people, let's see what we can do. So what I want people to think about is that there is no part of the body that cannot be exercised. That's the important thing to start with. You can start with your head. You can. Okay, let's think of this sitting in 3 different ways. You can be sitting on the floor with no support. You can be sitting in a normal style chair, or you can be sitting in a wheelchair. They will all give you different amounts of support. But what you need to do ideally is have the minimal support. If you need full wheelchair support, that's fine. If you can manage with ordinary chair, that is better. If you're on the floor, you have much more room to move. The biggest issue with wheelchair, if you are strapped, you've got your strap or your harness on, see if you can get your arm rests out of the way and your foot rests out of the way to give yourself more space. You can start from the head. If your head is particularly weak, start just by pushing your head back into the back of your wheelchair, because that will bring your shoulders back and your head back. If you have good head control, you have no problems with it, get that head back. You can push into your hands as an exercise, but you need to get that head moving. All directions, twist, twist. If you want to do some work that's a bit of a game, and this is why I have the orange, you can do that thing where you're trying to do the exercise, keeping, whoops, I didn't succeed, keeping the orange under your chin as you turn. So that will work some of the muscles at the front of your head. You can also be in a settee or be back in the chair, push your head back. But as I say, if you can get your hands behind your head, you can be pushing your head back into your arms. And the beauty of that one is that's getting your shoulder blades working as well. So from head, you can do your face muscles, whether you want to or not. Some of the kids might. You can do lots of blowing games. So from there, we're going to shoulders. Okay, shoulders are important. Kyphosis, you're here. Your shoulders, apart from moving your shoulder joints, you have your shoulder girdle. The shoulder girdle does 4 basic movements. Elevation, we don't want. Depression, getting your shoulder blades down towards your bottom. Protraction, kyphosis, retraction, getting your shoulder blades to kiss at the back. Okay, so we want depression, get those shoulder blades down. Retraction, get them back. Back, you can do that through big arm movements. You can do that with TheraBand, one at a time. Get those shoulders back, archery style. Get those shoulders back, archery style. If the back of your wheelchair is in the way, try and come forwards a little bit. Otherwise, get yourself well supported and just go back as far as you can. TheraBand. If you can't lift your arms very high, it doesn't matter. Still try and pull that TheraBand apart. That is where your wheelchair arms may get in the way. Keep your elbows as straight as you can. Doesn't matter if they're bent. Pull it once. Now, with TheraBand, the closer your hands are together, the harder the work. This is yellow. It is one of the weaker ones. If you've got blue or green, you will get more resistance. It is hard work. This one, pulling across you, have it fixed somewhere here, pull across, pull across. Lots of things you can do with TheraBand. You can tie it into a ring and work your shoulders in a ring. What we were saying about tucking your elbows in, I haven't tied it very tight, it might not work, but twisting out, keep your elbows tucked in and pull apart that way. You can really feel that on your spine and shoulder blades. Excellent exercise. Now, it doesn't matter if there's no movement. Static work still works your muscles. If you can go nowhere, I'm not really getting this TheraBand to move very far, but I can still feel it on my shoulders. Then we need to look at moving those shoulder joints. Now, I know many of you can't do that. I accept, but you can do it in lying, so don't ignore it when you've got on the bed. Okay, this is the one we were talking about. If you can't do it with the TheraBand, do it, even if you do it on a table, so that you're sliding your hands across the table. Really good shoulder exercise. If you have a table in front of you, slide, get a couple of cans of beans, slide them outwards, get somebody to push them back, slide them out. Wrist weights. Don't have to be enormous. Give you that extra bit of work. Now, one of the muscles we don't want to work that we've said is the ones that bend. It's very hard to do exercise without bending. How are we going to do it? So we can start thinking about pushing. Push, push. Now again, if you're worried about overusing this muscle, do it on a table. Push away, push away. Either get somebody to give you resistance, get something heavy to push, bring your arm back in, get them to bring it back in for you. Push away, push. Pushing is a much better exercise. So if you've got a weight, push away and down. Push away and bring it down. Push away. So think what you want to work. You want to work triceps, straightening, turning over, hands over, hands over. You can do it. Get your books open. Get your cards turned over. Do yourself a race. Have 2 packs of cards. See how fast you can turn 2 packs of cards over so that you can play games while you're doing it. The kids can play games while they're doing it. Quick game of Snap. Anything that you can think of. Okay, hands. Pushing. Push. If you've got something in front of you, push. Push those beans away. Push straight. Push. It can be static. You could be at a table. Push that table away. Push that table away as I was doing. Push sideways. It doesn't have to be high. You don't have to be up. Even if it's down on your knees. Push. Push. Get those arms working. Push straight. Push. Turn. Push. Turn. Joe Wicks, eat your heart out. Turn and push. Okay. Now what we want to do is get some stretches in as well. Pull across, across. Get those elbows stretched. Pull across. Don't forget this one, across your body. Reach across, reach across. Aim for something over there. It doesn't matter if it's not big. If it's across your knee, across your knee. Aim for something over there. If the wheel sides of the wheelchair are in the way, get up on a table, across the table, across the table. Move those shoulders. Don't make excuses. Find a way around all those different things. Now, when it comes to legs, if you're very weak in your legs, the first thing you need to do is get your foot plates out the way and do a bit of dangling. And just dangle backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. Then roll. In and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. Roll. You're not lifting, you're just rolling those legs in and out, in and out. You can't see my feet, that's going to get difficult. At some point in time, we will try, and I will set up next time to do some more active session. What I'll try and do is maybe do a session where I'm sorted in more Pilates, but please don't say you can't do it. It doesn't matter if there's no movement. Doesn't matter if I'm pushing this table and it's too heavy, I am still working my shoulders really well. I am still working my triceps really well. Get somebody in front of you, push against them. Great shoulder work, great elbow work. So we've got head, neck, we need trunk. We're getting a bit late. Any more questions? We're going to do this again in a fortnight, so we can add to it from then. Lots of questions, please. Don't mind. More the merrier. Andy, more questions? We've got a couple of minutes.
So let me just have a look. Do you recommend a hip reduction surgery in total bilateral hip dislocation in 6-year-old non-ambulant type 2 child?
Okay, now, unfortunately, we have a big hips workshop planned for June, and it's likely we're going to have to cancel it. The hip guidelines in the standards of care say no hip surgery. We have a UK meeting planned. We've got some amazing orthopedic surgeons planning to come to it, but unfortunately, as I say, it's probably not going to happen in June. At the moment, we would only recommend surgery on a child who is likely to walk. So if we have a good type 2 who's got hips that are out, who with Spinraza may well walk, then yes, at this point in time, we would probably say yes. Hip surgery is not small. Putting hips back is not a little operation. It could weaken a child quite dramatically, and we need to think about at what point we would do it. If we have a type 2 who is going to walk and we want those hips done, do we do it before they walk? Do we do it once they're walking? We don't know. This is the problem. Standards of care and consensus was always don't touch those hips in type 1 and type 2. Now we don't know. So at this point in time, depending on how strong that child was, would probably give you a better idea of the decision. If you're not going to walk, if your child is not going to walk, you would have to very carefully consider why you are doing such big surgery.
Excellent. I think that's it for now. There are obviously, if there are any other questions that we haven't picked up, because it's been a busy evening tonight, a really popular session, then please do email them and we will pass them on to Marion to answer. And we'll also pass you on the requests for the splint instructions, Marion, as well.
And also, as I say, I'm quite happy to do a peanut exercise thing.
No problem. Well, thank you very much, as usual, for your time.
We talked about doing them fortnightly while we're in quarantine or isolating. Do you think that's going to be a popular idea?
Yeah, I think so. Judging by the number of people that we're getting attending the sessions, I think
I'm quite happy to do one in a couple of weeks. Now, it would be Easter weekend, so I'm not sure. Obviously, Easter's not going to be Easter this year. It may be a good counter to all the chocolate that people are still going to be eating. So 2 weeks would be Easter. It'll be what, the 12th? So I'm happy to do the 12th. If people wanted a different day, I could do that as well. Otherwise, it looks like we've got a date on the 12th of April.
Sounds good. Brilliant. All right, Marion, we will look forward to another session with you then. Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Keep indoors. Stay safe. See you in a couple of weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.